If we were to go back 2 years in Rise of Kingdoms history and we were to discuss archer commanders and which ones were the meta at the time, I think everybody would know Nebuchadnezzar would probably get rank 1, if maybe rank 2 on the list of the best archer commanders at the time. And when he was first released, he was probably up there with some of the best commanders in the game, if not almost better than some of the best, like Guan Yu, who was so dominant in that time period. So what has caused Nebu to no longer become an extremely powerful commander? And in today's video, I'm going to be discussing that. Why has Nebu fallen from graces, and is he still even worth your investment? Because I still get players nowadays who ask me, should I get Nebuchadnezzar or should I skip him? So if you're interested in Nebuchadnezzar and why I think he's a bad commander now, you want to stick around till the end of the video. Now, let's start off today's video by discussing what made Nebuchadnezzar very unique when he first released. Because what makes a commander good? Well, it's a unique and powerful kit. You could have 101 commanders who are slightly better than the other one, but in most situations, if a commander's got a unique kit and has something we haven't really seen before, or something we've seen but a lot better with extra spice, then they're going to be a good commander. And Nebuchadnezzar was no exception to this rule. When Nebuchadnezzar released, he probably had around 4 main things that made him a really strong commander. And we'll start off with the first one of those, and that is his talent trees were extremely unique, and they still are a very, very important thing in his kit. One thing that made Nebuchadnezzar was really strong was having the Conquering Tree, which is just a very good tree right here, giving you the Buckler Shield, making you take less counterattack, and then also just having the Skill Tree. Once again, a very, very powerful tree to have, and it's very good in the open field because it allows you to get very quick rage cycles. And honestly, I've been noticing the more and more I don't use the skill tree, the more and more I really want the skill tree. So the skill tree with the Conquering Tree is really powerful. And other than that, he's got the Archer Tree, which is obviously just a solid talent tree. So Nebuchadnezzar's talent trees still are and will remain one of the best Archer Commander talent trees in the game, just because of how amazing they are for the open field and also in rally situations. But mainly, I love the Conquering Tree and I love the Skill Tree in his kit, and it synergizes a lot with other commanders. Now, the next thing in Nebu's kit that is probably his most iconic thing and the most powerful part of his kit is his active skill, and this is probably the thing that when you look at Nebuchadnezzar, instantly you're like, okay, this is why he was the meta. And it's because when Nebuchadnezzar was first released into the game, he had probably the second or third best active skill in the game. Maybe I would say third. Guan Yu's active skill is slightly better for the insane debuff, and YSG's active skill was slightly better for the extra damage. But Nebuchadnezzar's active skill was a 5-target AoE in a fan-shaped area, dealing 1,500 direct damage factor. And at his time of release, this was the second best active skill for archers in the whole entire game, and it worked really, really well. Having a 5-target AoE with that much damage factor was insanely powerful, and it was probably, I think, the third 5-target AoE in the game. Ethelflaed had one, and YSG had one, and that was it. So Nebuchadnezzar had that really unique thing of having a very powerful 5-target AoE with extremely meta damage factor. Like when Nebuchadnezzar was released, Cyrus the Great was released, and Cyrus's active skill is less damage factor, and it's a single target. Nebuchadnezzar's is more to 5 targets, so Nebuchadnezzar's active skill was insane. And the next thing that was really good with him was his second skill, which gave him stats, was really, really good as well. It gave him defense, which wasn't really common on archers. I mean, you had Artemisia, and I think you had Edward of Woodstock, and that was about it. And he had March speed, which is really good. It was just all around 15% March speed, and still to this day, that is a meta amount of March speed. So Nebuchadnezzar's first 2 skills were extremely powerful, which brings you on to that third or fourth benefit almost, and that is you didn't need to invest heavily into Nebuchadnezzar. When he first came out, 5-5-1-1, which is the first 2 skills maxed out and nothing else, was so strong that you didn't even need to bother with his third and fourth skill, especially since his third skill was a rally, his fourth skill is good but not needed, and his expertise is pretty much useless unless you are rallying. So Nebuchadnezzar, when you looked at all of his skills, he was a cheap investment who bought a lot of power at the time, and he had good talent trees. You pretty much couldn't ask for a better commander at that point in time. And if you wanted to invest further, his fourth skill was really good. It had a rage reduction, which we didn't really see on commanders at the time, besides the Silent Trial, and he had a 15% all damage bonus, which is still a very large amount of all damage to this day. So Nebuchadnezzar had a very cheap free-to-play investment, and then a possible later investment if you chose to go down there free debuff and some extra all damage, which obviously the all damage and the debuff are really strong. So Nebuchadnezzar's kit at the time was probably up there with some of the best commanders in the game, not to mention the fact that he had that AoE to go with it. Now, the other thing that made Nebuchadnezzar really powerful when he was first released were his main pairings. And well, I don't really mean pairings, but I think more just his main pair, his single best pair when he first released. And this was with YSG. And when Nebuchadnezzar first released, YSG was the single commander that pretty much every single account had unlocked and expertised. It was the thing. Whenever you made a new account, you get YSG, you expertise him, and you take him into Season of Conquest with Alexander the Great. That was pretty much what you did every time. But what did Nebuchadnezzar do? Well, Nebuchadnezzar was probably, and still is, one of the best pairings for YSG. And at the time, he was the single best because they had so much synergy. YSG, just to start off, had 50% more skill damage. What does that really benefit? It benefits someone greatly who has AoE. Nebuchadnezzar has a 5-target AoE just like YSG's AoE. YSG's got a ton of rage gain. Nebuchadnezzar, amazing active skill to go with that rage gain. Once again, a lot of synergy there. And then Nebuchadnezzar's kit also plays a role in this. The Nebu has a lot of march speed. YSG has 0 march speed, so they need to go together for that. And also Nebuchadnezzar has 30% defense. YSG had no defense, so Nebuchadnezzar almost gave a slight amount of tankiness and a slight amount of sustain to your YSG and made it so that YSG could actually live longer on the open field. So since Nebuchadnezzar and YSG were very, very great pairings, a lot of players went for Nebu, and since Nebu was a cheap investment, they could often get Nebu to 5-5-1-1 and then go get their Guan Yu to like expertise, and then they'd have 2 very solid marches. You'd have a Nebuchadnezzar YSG and you'd have an Alex with a Guan Yu, and at the time, that was amazingly strong, and Nebuchadnezzar never really needed to go above that 5-5-1-1 and just stat with your YSG, and it was a good pairing, it was fast enough to sustain itself, and it had good defense. So Nebuchadnezzar at that time period was one of the best Archer commander investments, but the only thing was he was an MGE commander. That was the real only struggle behind him, but Lilith ended up adding him to events like the legendary chest, and he was, I think, probably the last commander added there, and they've also added him now to things like the daily special offer, which definitely do help his value and make him easier to access, so more players were using him, and that means a lot of more free-to-plays and lower spenders could access him and get that really cheap investment by only taking him to 5-5-1-1, so a lot of players just ended up running him at that level in their murder ball. So now that we've done a very quick Nebuchadnezzar crash course, basically what he was like over the past 2 years, why is he falling out of the meta now? What has changed to make Nebuchadnezzar a pretty much, let me just say it, almost trash commander? What have they done to him to make him not good? And nothing has really changed with Nebuchadnezzar himself. It's more the evolution of the meta and the 2 new Archer commanders coming out who pretty much do kick Nebu out of the meta. Because I made a video not that long ago, probably around 6 or 7 months ago, saying Nebuchadnezzar is trash. And that was a while ago now, and he was still a strong commander at that point in time. But he was definitely falling out of the meta, though Lilith did save him a little bit since he pairs really well with Zulang. Nebu Zulang is a fairly strong pairing. There's a lot of synergy between them. It's like Nebu YSG, just you've got a better YSG. So Nebuchadnezzar was almost slightly revived during that time period. But now I think the final nail in the coffin has fully hit Nebu. It's just over for him because everything in Nebu's kit has pretty much gotten an upgrade. And I think this really comes in the form of a Ashurbanipal. Ashurbanipal has pretty much just taken over Nebu in every regard. Archer conquering skill tree, something we hadn't seen besides on Gilgamesh, who wasn't really a meta field commander for very long. Well, guess who has it? Ashurbanipal has Archer conquering skill tree again. So Nebuchadnezzar lost that pretty much unique part of his kit that I personally definitely decided to take him to level 64 just for that skill tree, and also a reason I decided to invest in him really for the conquering tree and the skill tree. So Nebu doesn't have that unique part of his kit anymore. 5 target, 1500 damage AoE with on his expertise dealing some extra single target damage, gone. Ashurbanipal now takes that active skill and makes it even better, and you don't need to expertise him. So Nebuchadnezzar's very powerful active skill. Now you don't even need to invest in Nebu. All you need to do is get Ashurbanipal. You're getting Nebuchadnezzar's active skill with the conquering and skill tree, and you're also getting Nebu's expertise on just the first skill alone. So Nebuchadnezzar's active skill and Nebuchadnezzar's main kit right there has already been taken. The next part of Nebuchadnezzar's kit that has also been taken is the fact that Nebuchadnezzar's third skill, which was his most powerful skill pretty much in terms of stats, is also pretty much stolen by Ashurbanipal. The only difference is whenever Ashur is off territory, he gets 20% defense and 15% march speed. While he's on territory, he doesn't get those bonuses. So Nebuchadnezzar's second skill, which pairs really well with YSG and really well with Zhu Lang, has pretty much just been stripped off of his kit and given to another commander. So Nebuchadnezzar doesn't even have that unique part of his kit left. He's lost pretty much everything. He's lost his expertise value, he's lost his active skill value, he's lost his second skill value, he's lost his third skill value because he's not a main rally attack anymore. And finally, he's lost a lot of his fourth skill value because a lot of his fourth skill, something that was really good about it, was the rage reduction. It pretty much allowed you to almost, in a way, silence your opponent and allow them to gain less rage on a turn, because rage reduction, the way it works is it pretty much reduces the target's rage cap, because if you didn't know, you get a cap of like 220 rage per turn. Whenever you reduce the target's rage, it goes down by that number, which is pretty much the way it works. So if you had 220 rage and you got 300 rage, you're just straight up reducing the cap. So pretty much that rage reduction could be a 300 rage reduction depending on how much rage your opponent get in that one turn. So Nebuchadnezzar's rage reduction definitely was a powerful component, but nowadays we have commanders like, for example, a Manatori, who has a rage reduction. We've also got commanders like Tariq, a meta infantry commander, who is definitely stronger than Nebu, who has a rage reduction as well, and rage reductions are becoming a lot more common, not to mention that obviously the Silent Trial accessory, which is definitely more accessible nowadays, is actually also reducing rage. So Nebuchadnezzar's fourth skill, in terms of the rage reduction, there's a lot of other options out there to acquire that rage reduction, and I don't think that's going to slow down, especially since it's almost like a secondary debuff. Lilith will just throw it on random commanders, so Nebuchadnezzar's rage reduction also isn't really meta anymore. The only thing that pretty much wasn't stolen out of Nebuchadnezzar's whole entire kit was the fact that he can do 15% all damage. Out of every other archer commander in the game, pretty much besides Zhu Lang, he's the only commander that does that much all damage. Even then though, like I said before, Zhu Lang has a lot of all damage, and he has pretty much up to 10% here, plus he's got an all damage debuff. So Nebuchadnezzar's all damage, yes, it's still pretty good, but there's a lot of other commanders out there who give all damage, and a ton of commanders are just increasing all damage that targets take and reducing all damage they take, to the point where you don't really need this all damage as much. It's the only thing left in his kit that is the powerful part. And like I said, Zhu Lang has all damage as well. So Nebuchadnezzar's all damage, yes, it is unique and not many archer commanders have it, but it's not 100% needed, and it's something that if you're going to pair him with Zhu Lang, since the more one stat you have, the less value that stat has, the less value the all damage is going to have. So Nebuchadnezzar has pretty much had every single part of his kit almost stolen and made slightly better. Not to mention that Nebuchadnezzar, in terms of his best pairings, now really only has Zhu Lang, because not many players nowadays invest in YSG. There's pretty much no reason to invest in him unless you're a mid-spender or a lower spender player who is going to be an archer main, because otherwise you're going to end up getting a commander like YSG, and then you want to get a Nevsky, but you've spent a ton of gold heads on YSG who you didn't really need to, and Nevsky comes way quicker than he used to, and all of these commanders, you get access to them earlier. So less and less people are choosing to invest in YSG. YSG is becoming less and less field dominant. We see him much less on the open field nowadays. I still only run him nowadays for his AoE and his damage, which, I mean, I guess that's most of his kit, but he is really only in my mutable by just pretty much sheer luck and the amount of commanders I need. As an archer main, I want to run 3 marchers, YSG is in that number, but for a lot of players, they're better off running like a Boudica and an Artemisia and a Henry and a Zhu Lang than they are running a YSG in that mutable. There's almost no reason to run YSG unless you're an archer main, low spender, free to play. And that means Nebu definitely gets hit hard with that, because most players are going to run Henry, they're going to run Zhu Lang, they're going to run the Boudica and her meta pairings. YSG, yes, he works among those commanders, but he's just not a first pick commander for a lot of players nowadays who choose to go down different routes and save their gold heads. So Nebuchadnezzar, his most old meta pairing commander, definitely is nowhere near as strong and nowhere near as used by a lot of players, which obviously affects his investment potential by a lot. It's almost like saying Artemisia and Boudica if Boudica fell out of the meta. Obviously, Artemisia is just going to die with her. So Nebuchadnezzar is pretty much losing out on one of his best pairings, since YSG is nowhere near as strong as he used to be. So now, for all those reasons, it's quite obvious that Nebuchadnezzar is definitely beginning to fall out of the meta. So now that we've finished discussing Nebuchadnezzar's kit and why I think he's fallen out of the meta, why do I think you just shouldn't invest in him? Because we know that some commanders who fall out of the meta still have investment potential, like Artemisia. She's fallen out of the meta. I said around 8 months ago, she's gone, she's not in the meta anymore, and that's clearly a fact. Most players are not going to invest in her, but she still has uses. You can still pair her with your Boudica. She's still a fairly strong commander in that regard, and a lot of players still decide to invest in her for that reason. But why do I think Nebuchadnezzar has gone down to a level where he's pretty much the same investment as Edward of Woodstock? Why is he that bad? And really simply, the reason I don't like Nebuchadnezzar anymore is because when we look at Nebuchadnezzar's kit, it's taken by other commanders and made better, and mainly it's taken by Ashurbanipal, the upcoming archer rally commander, who is pretty much just a better Nebuchadnezzar. So why would you invest in Nebu when you could just get the next archer rally commander who does everything Nebu does, but slightly better? So that's the main reason. Nebuchadnezzar right now just is not in that meta position where I would say you should invest in him. And even then, you've got commanders like Omen Prime who will do not really Nebu's kit, but will do what Nebu's supposed to do, and also be A, easier to access, and B, cheaper to use than Nebuchadnezzar, because Herman Prime works really well with Zulang. He's going to work really well with YSG. Why would you get a Nebu? It doesn't really make sense, because you could put YSG with Boudica Prime, who everybody would say Boudica is better than Nebu, and you put Zulang with Herman Prime, and you've got a good march right there. You don't even need the Nebu. There's pretty much no point in getting him. And if you want to get him from Mightiest Governor, you might as well just get Ashurbanipal. So the only reason anyone might even consider investing in Nebu is if they get him from like the Legendary Tavern or Legendary Chest, or they buy him from the daily special offer, and that's probably the only reason. If you're buying him in the special offer, he might be worth it, but for the most part, you're still better off with other commanders like Zhang Yu, you're better off with commanders like William, even Guan Yu has better investment potential than Nebuchadnezzar. So when we look at Nebu, I don't think he's a meta investment anymore. I don't think pretty much anyone should invest in him. Even before, when I said he was bad, I said he's still got investment potential, but nowadays it's just definitely a no-go. There's just new commanders coming out who do what Nebu does, but better, and you know what they say, if you want to be a strong player, you have to invest in the meta, and Nebuchadnezzar just is not the meta anymore. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, or you found my opinion interesting, or you found what I said interesting, consider joining the Archer Syndicate Discord server. It's one of the best Discord servers to get up-to-date Rise of Kingdoms information about Archer commanders, about Archer meta, when commanders are releasing, possible commander pairings. It's a great place for that, and you can even directly message me on there. You can ping me, you can chat to other channel members, you can ask people questions. It's one of the best Rise of Kingdoms Archer servers, and the link for the server will be in the pinned comment and also in the description. So do consider joining. It is much appreciated to everybody who does join, and it's a really, really fun server. So I hope to see you guys there. Now, I just want to say thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.